Well, hello. Um, I want to start just a very short Bible study, just 5 weeks. And we're going to look at one of the shorter books of the Bible, the book of Jude in the New Testament. You'll find it between 3rd John and Revelation. I find it a very interesting book. I hope you do too. Let me bring up my screen here, and we will look at Jude. The whole book is just 25 verses long. I'd recommend you read it each time we do the study. It's only 25 verses. You can do that in just a little over a minute, maybe 2 minutes. We are going to focus, however, here on the first 4 verses. So let's look at it. This letter is from Jude, a slave of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. I'm writing to all of being called by God the Father, who loves you and keeps you safe in the care of Christ. May God give you more and more mercy, peace, and love. Dear friends, I had been eagerly planning to write you about the salvation we all share. But now I find that I must write you about something else, urging you to defend the faith that God has entrusted once for all time to his holy people. I say this because some ungodly people have wormed their way into your churches, saying that God's marvelous grace allows us to live immoral lives. The condemnation of such people was recorded long ago, for they have denied our only Master and Lord, Jesus Christ. Now, the first thing that I wanted to look at today was the purpose for the letter. Jude states here in verse 3 that he had been wanting to write about the salvation that we all share. Kind of a generic letter that would deal with simply what Jesus has done for us. But he can't do that because something has happened. And now he is urging them to defend the faith against a heretical movement that's cropped up. That is the purpose of the letter. He's going to urge the recipients to defend the faith. So let's pop up back here to the first verse. Talk about authorship. This letter is from Jude, a slave of Jesus Christ and a brother of James. Let's look here elsewhere in the Bible, Mark 6:3. There we find that if we look at the full chapter, Jesus left that part of the country, returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. He taught in a synagogue, but they asked, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? Then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. Looking back here at the book of Jude, letters from Jude, brother of James, a slave of Jesus Christ. According to church history, Jude is the half-brother of Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph, brother of James. James is mentioned in the book of Acts as one of the prominent leaders in the first church. That's the author. What about the date? Well, we see something very interesting when we look at the date. If we go to 2 Peter in the 2nd chapter, if we look at Jude, the 4th verse, he talks about the heretics that are in the church, say that they worm their way into the church. The condemnation of such people was recorded long ago. And if you'll look at 2 Peter 2, verse 4, verse 3, talking about false teachers. In their greed, they'll make up clever lies to get hold of your money. God condemned them long ago. Their destruction won't be delayed. Jude, verse 6. I remind you of the angels who didn't stay within the limits of authority that God gave them, but they left the place where they belonged. God has kept them securely chained in prisons of darkness, waiting for the great day of judgment. And in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, God did not spare even the angels who sinned. He threw them into hell in gloomy pits of darkness, where they're being held until the day of judgment. Do you see the similarity there with Jude? Even 2:15 here in 2 Peter, talking about these people, he says they've wandered off the right road and followed the footsteps of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved to earn money by doing wrong. And in Jude, verse 11, what sorrow awaits them? They follow in the footsteps of Cain, who killed his brother. Like Balaam, they deceive people for money. The whole issue here is that Jude appears to be quoting 2 Peter. Now, we're talking about date. So if Jude is quoting 2 Peter, he has to be written after Peter. So we put Jude in the very late 1st century. Let's talk about content. There is an introduction, the first 4 verses of Jude. In the introduction, Jude gives the purpose that he's writing the epistles for. He wants his recipients to defend the faith that God has entrusted to his holy people against some heretics who are saying that God's marvelous grace allows us to live immoral lives. From verses 5 to verse 7, Jude talks about the judgment of God. God is going to judge immorality. He is going to judge those who did not remain faithful. He's going to judge those who didn't stay within their limits of authority. He's going to accuse the heretics of all 3 of these things. Then, from verse 8 to 11, he focuses more specifically on authority. He says that these heretics claim authority from their dreams. He goes on talking about that. From verses 12 to 16, he says, here's why you have to fear. Here's why you have to worry about these people. When these people eat with you, they're like dangerous reefs that can shipwreck you. He moves on and he talks more about the people then, from 8 to 11, from 12 to 16. And finally, starting in verse 17, he tells them, and here's what you need to do. First of all, remember what the apostles said, and then build each other up. Show mercy to those whose faith is wavering. Rescue others. Show mercy to still others, but do so with great caution. Those are the contents. Now we're going to work our way in studies later on through the final 4 sections. Let's talk about the heretics themselves. And to do that, we focus really on 2 verses. First of all, the heretics claim authority from their dreams. They no longer look to the word of Christ or to the Bible for their authority. They claim authority because they've received visions. They claim personal authority because of the visions that they've received. They live immoral lives. Now, jump back up here to verse 4. They say that God's marvelous grace allows us to live immoral lives. Apparently, just like those to whom Paul was referring in Romans chapter 2, they say that God's grace forgives all sin. So why worry about sin? We can go ahead and live the way they want. These also live immoral lives. They defy authority, and here they reject the authority of the church. Apparently, the church has already approached them and called them to task, and they've rejected the church, claiming authority on their own visions and continuing to live in immorality. And they even dare to scoff at supernatural beings. Then later in verse 16, these people are grumblers and complainers. So they are thwarting the plans of the church. They live only to satisfy their desires. Again, that goes back to the immoral life that they're living. They brag loudly about themselves, probably making reference to the visionary authority that they claim. God has given me a vision, so you need to listen to me now. And finally, they flatter others to get what they want. These are the heretics. These are the reason Jude is writing the early church. Take a couple of minutes and read through the book of Jude. You're going to see things that cause you to stop and think and wonder. We're going to try to address those things in subsequent studies.